You think desire is what's running you, a familiar tug that arrives and you move to relieve it. And for a moment, you believe you are satisfied. But right after that, what remains is not contentment, but a deeper hollow. Have you ever noticed this? You numb a long tiredness with a few taps, a few minutes lost in pleasure, and when the screen goes dark, you find yourself more exhausted than before. It's like drinking seawater when you're thirsty. At first you believe you've been saved, but the more you drink, the fiercer the thirst becomes. So you do it again, harder than before, hoping one day you'll feel full. And the cruel truth is you never do, because what you call want was never the real problem. It is only the surface. The root is a silence you won't name, the emptiness of days that feel meaningless, the emptiness of hunting for someone to fill a place no one can occupy, the emptiness of long nights you pretend are busy when really you are only afraid to meet the quiet. Jung would say desire is only a signal, and that signal is screaming that your soul has been starved. But instead of listening, you run, again and again, on short doses of relief. In this video, you will be shown a truth most people avoid. Desire is not the enemy. It is the map back to where you were abandoned. And if you stay with me to the end, you will learn how to step out of that hollow loop and begin to feed your soul again. And the moment you see that, really see it, everything can change. Notice how the pattern has made itself ordinary. An urge, a quick fix, a brief high, the crash, the shame, the repeat. You begin to assume this is who you are, that wanting is your nature, and so you judge yourself. You hide, you pretend to be in control, but beneath the motions there is a message, a gentle alarm from the part of you no longer held. And the courage this video asks of you is not the dramatic kind, not a heroic overhaul overnight. It is simply the willingness to pause the reflex, to let the signal be heard, to treat wanting not as a moral failure but as a direction, a pointing. Whatever you've tried so far to silence the hunger, distraction, busyness, scrolling, quick comforts, has only buried the question deeper. What am I actually hungry for? Ask that once, and the first door opens. You may tell yourself this is just a normal need, that everyone does it. But if it were truly only a need, why do you feel tired, even ashamed, after the relief? If it were purely instinct, why does the emptiness deepen with every repetition? This has stopped being a natural thirst. It has become a spiral, a loop you can map. Fatigue arrow, urge arrow, relief arrow, hollow. And then hollow returns, and you reach for another dose to cover it up. Round and round you go on a wheel. You never step off. Picture a day. You wake up heavy, not simply because you slept poorly, but because last night you scattered your energy into a void. At work, you try to focus, yet your mind steals away into little escapes. At night, you come home exhausted, and instead of real rest, you hunt a fast stimulant, the screen, the image, that instant pleasure. And the next morning, the same story repeats. The frightening thing is not the desire itself. It is how ordinary the pattern has become. You have allowed that loop to become part of your rhythm. Jung would call this the unconscious taking charge. You think you are choosing, but in truth you are reacting, and those reflexes give you nothing but depletion. Many people believe they can break the cycle by forcing themselves, by clamping down and denying. But the harder you clamp, the stronger the urge becomes, and so the pattern slides into its alternate shape. Guilt, suppression, eruption, emptiness. Perhaps this sounds familiar, not because you are weak, but because you are fighting the wrong enemy. Desire is merely a curtain. Behind it sits the real shadow, the unlooked-at emptiness. When you refuse to name it, it returns again and again to demand your attention. Until you dare to face it, you will keep choosing the wrong remedies. The more you chase what you call satisfaction, the further you move from the part of your soul that is calling for you. The problem is not wanting. The problem is that you were never taught how to sit with the lack itself. And this is where the real story begins. Sitting with the lack is not a passive surrender. It is a practice of presence that most of us never learned. We were taught to do, to fix, to distract. So when hunger rises, we reach for action because action feels like competence. But reflexive action here is a form of exile. It banishes the very question that could free you. What if the correct move is not to heighten your doing, but to hold your being? What if the medicine is attention, not another stimulus? This is why suppression fails. It treats the symptom like an enemy to be buried rather than a messenger to be read. You will not outwork the hollow. You will only exhaust yourself trying. The radical, difficult alternative is to name the void, to call it by its true name, and to learn to sit beside it without filling it, to listen instead of reacting. That listening is the place where choice returns. It is where you discover you are not a creature of reflexes, but an agent who can learn new responses. It is where guilt softens into curiosity, where shame loosens into inquiry, and where the loop begins to lose its power. So the task is simple and not simple. Stop battling the wrong thing. Stop treating desire as the enemy. Look toward the emptiness you have been avoiding, and permit yourself to stay, to feel, to ask, what is this really asking of me? Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And that is exactly what's happening in the loop you're caught in. You think desire is natural, something irresistible. But the truth is, it's only an excuse to avoid staring straight into the emptiness inside. Because if you sat still with that void, you'd feel the loneliness, the meaninglessness, the lack of connection, things far more unbearable than lust itself. So you choose the easier solution, chasing a quick hit of satisfaction. But be honest with yourself. How many times have you sat beside someone and still felt cold? How many times have you finished and only wanted to turn your face away, as if you'd just eaten a meal that filled your stomach but left no nourishment behind? How many times have you opened a screen, only to realize after hours have passed that you still feel as hollow as when you began? That isn't lust. That's a signal. Jung called it the knock of the unconscious. What you mistake for physical craving is really your soul screaming, "Look at me. I'm starving," but you misinterpret it. You think you need more from the outside, more images, more bodies, more experiences. And the more you seek, the further you drift. Nietzsche warned that modern man is turning pleasure into a sedative, using it to cover over the emptiness for a moment. But you know better than anyone that once the drug wears off, the emptiness returns, even heavier than before. This is the place where you need a pause, not to condemn yourself, not to force yourself into being more righteous, but to read the signal correctly. Because when you see that desire is not the enemy but the signpost, you can start asking the only question that matters. What am I really hungry for? That question doesn't end the thirst immediately, but it cracks open a door. And for the first time you realize you're not broken, not powerless. You're simply someone who abandoned a part of yourself for too long, and now it's time to go back and find it. Jung said that what we refuse in the unconscious returns as fate, and here what you've been refusing is emptiness. You don't name it, so it comes back in a form easier to swallow. It comes back as desire, because desire offers you a story that makes sense. You can tell yourself, I just need one. More release, and I'll be fine. And that story is much easier to accept than whispering to yourself, "My life feels meaningless right now." But the mechanism doesn't stop there. It begins with a split. Because when you cut yourself off from the anima, the inner feminine that represents nurture, intuition, connection, you abandoned a part of yourself, and that absence never disappeared. It only put on different clothing to demand your attention, and this time it dressed itself as lust. You think you're longing for a body, but what you're actually starving for is the feeling of being held, of returning to a piece of yourself you exiled. And the more you try to fill that lack from the outside, the tighter the spiral pulls you in. The more you search, the less it satisfies. The more you indulge, the emptier you feel. It works like sugar when you're sad. You eat it, you get a quick spike, and then the crash leaves you more drained than before. That is exactly how desire behaves when it's used to cover emptiness. You get a dopamine hit, then the drop, then the craving for more. Not because your body truly needs more, but because the void has never been faced directly. This is what Jung called possession by the unconscious, when the rejected part takes the driver's seat and runs your life in the dark. You think it's you, but it isn't. It's the shadow choosing for you. And if you never become conscious of this, you'll go on believing this loop is simply your nature. But the truth is very different. You are not corrupted because you feel desire. You're simply letting the void dictate your behavior. And right here lies the turning point. The moment you recognize the spiral, you have the chance to choose differently. Instead of chasing the false hunger, you can dare to sit with the real one. Sitting with it isn't easy. It carries silence, loneliness, the fear that maybe there's nothing inside you worth finding. But if you stay long enough, something unexpected happens. You realize desire was never a trap. It was a map, pointing straight toward the place where your soul was hidden. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll uncover the truth most people miss. That very emptiness you've been avoiding is not your enemy. It is the doorway home. Imagine inside you, there is a dining table that stretches endlessly. At the center of that table sits a main plate, always empty, covered with a thin layer of dust because it has been so long since any real nourishment was placed there. Each night you sit at this table, feeling a hunger rising from within. But instead of serving the main dish, you pile it with cheap snacks. A few swipes of the screen, a handful of fleeting images, a few minutes of quick pleasure. They fill you just enough to trick your body, but soon the table is empty again, and the dust settles thicker, as if to remind you the real meal has never arrived. That hunger is not of the stomach. It is the hunger of the soul. And this table is the metaphor for the deepest part of you that has been forgotten. Each time you chase desire, you are like the one who rushes to toss crumbs and candy onto the plate, pretending you've been fed. But the more you add, the more obvious the absence of the main dish becomes. The more snacks, the sharper your awareness of the emptiness at the center. Jung would tell you that your soul never needed snacks. It has been asking for a different feast, the feast of presence, of genuine connection, of reunion with the anima you've cast aside. But to prepare that feast, you must be willing to sit still, to bear the silence, to endure the lack, instead of throwing another handful of junk food onto the plate. And that is the hardest part, to sit and wait, and allow the real dish to arrive. This invisible hunger doesn't vanish when you satisfy desire. It only quiets for a moment, then returns, reminding you that the table has never held a true banquet. And so the question is no longer, why am I always hungry? But will I dare, even once, to sit and prepare the real meal for my soul? If you truly hold a mirror to your own loop, You'll see it doesn't just surface in those late nights alone with a screen. It creeps into the way you step into relationships, too. You search for someone to fill the hollow, hoping their presence will make you feel whole. But after the first wave of excitement fades, the same familiar emptiness returns. Not because the other person isn't good enough, but because you've given them an impossible task: to be the main dish at the table inside you. And when they cannot, you feel disappointed, and you slip back into the same cycle. Have you ever noticed yourself clinging to someone only to hide from the fear of being abandoned? Have you ever realized you don't dare sit quietly alone because the silence would expose the very emptiness you've been avoiding? So, you run to stimulation, anything to keep from touching that truth. You tell yourself it's just instinct, that everyone does it, but deep down, you know it's only your way of dodging the dust-covered table within. Jung pointed out that the shadow doesn't vanish simply because you deny it. It will return, stronger, through the very behaviors you can't control. Each time you escape through desire, you hand over the reins to the void, and with each surrender, you lose another fragment of trust in yourself. You think desire is what makes you feel alive, but in truth, it only deepens your dependence. What you truly need is the courage to look into the emptiness behind it. If you don't, the loop will continue, and you will remain the one sitting before an empty table, throwing down snacks in haste, waiting forever for a main dish that never comes. But if you stop just once and whisper to yourself, "What am I really hungry for?" in that instant, the mirror shifts. You no longer see a broken person. You see a soul that has simply gone unfed. And that is the truth you must face. You've grown used to calling it lust, but pause for a moment and rename it. Call it a signal, because only when you change the language can you escape the old frame of seeing. As long as you keep labeling it as something dirty, shameful, you will keep running. But if you see it as a signal, you begin to listen, and listening is the only doorway back. That signal is telling you a part of you has been left starving. It doesn't need more pleasure. It needs you to return. Jung once said that what you resist will continue to rule you, and what you accept, you can transform. So instead of straining to deny, try whispering to yourself, "I am not broken because I crave. I am hearing a reminder." A new language opens a new perspective. Instead of "I am addicted," you can say, "I am learning to read the signal." Instead of "I am weak," you can say, "I am moving through a hunger." When you change the words, you don't paint the truth prettier than it is. You place it in a context where you can choose your response, and that subtle shift can change the entire experience. The reality is, you don't need more images or bodies. You need more presence. You don't need more pleasure. You need a deeper connection to the soul. The old language traps you in the spiral of guilt, suppression, eruption. The new language leads you into the spiral of acceptance, listening, transformation. This is the turning of perception. You are no longer the one controlled by desire. You are simply someone learning to read a message. Let this sentence echo inside you. I do not hunger for the body. I hunger for wholeness. It can become a mantra, saving you each time the old loop returns. Each time you repeat it, you affirm again that the invisible hunger is no longer a chain. It is a compass pointing the way. And in that instant, choice comes back. You are no longer the chosen. You are the chooser. If you refuse to change the words, you will keep locking yourself inside the same frame, a prison of self-accusation. But if you dare to alter the language, you've already altered the way you live. You cannot break the loop with thought alone. You need small actions that pull the signal out of the unconscious and into the light. The next time the urge comes, Instead of rushing to answer it, pause and take a deep breath. 3 slow inhales are enough to bring you back into presence. Then ask yourself, what am I really hungry for? Simply asking breaks the automatic reflex. Step 2. Write down what you feel. Putting it on paper helps you see this is not a hunger of the body, but a longing for connection. Those words become a mirror, reflecting the truth to you. Step 3. Create small moments of nourishment in your day. Take a walk without headphones, sit by a window for a few minutes, or simply place your hand over your chest and feel your heartbeat. These moments are like placing real food on the table, slow but sustaining. And when the urge returns, remind yourself with the affirmation, I don't need more pleasure. I need more presence. You don't have to get it perfect. All it takes is choosing once a day not to fall back into the old spiral. And from those small moments, the emptiness inside begins to fill with something real, not fleeting illusions. If you don't change, the spiral will go on swallowing you. It won't just steal a few peaceful nights. It will slowly rob you of whole years of real living. You will grow accustomed to using instant pleasure as a cover, and you will lose the ability to connect deeply with anyone. You might move through many relationships, many physical encounters, yet rarely feel truly touched. And the most dangerous part is not the hunger that never gets filled, but the false belief that you were broken all along, that you only ever deserve those fleeting moments. That is the price of letting the unconscious drive. But if you dare to change, even through small steps, you'll notice the difference. When you sit with emptiness, you realize it is not the abyss you thought it was. It is like a dark room locked away for years. At first, the dust and the musty smell make you uncomfortable, but if you stay long enough, you see the light begin to slip in, and inside that room lie treasures you once abandoned. Emptiness is the same. It is not a black hole sucking you dry, but a space where you can reconnect with your soul. Jung reminded us that symptoms are opportunities. Desire is not a chain, but a map. When you find the courage to read the signal for what it is, you stop fearing the invisible hunger. You know it is pointing the way. And from there, a new quality emerges: steadiness. You no longer need to chase images to feel enough. You are enough, even in silence. The final truth rests here. Desire was never the darkness you had to destroy. It was the lantern leading you into the very darkness you abandoned. And when you dare to step into it, you will discover you were never lacking. You were only learning the way back. When you step away from an urge, the first thing you meet is not happiness, but silence. It can make you restless because there is no noise left to cover you, no instant pleasure to distract you. But try to see that silence as a half-closed door. If you're patient enough to place your hand on it, it will open into another world, the one where your soul has been waiting to meet you again. You don't need to rush to fill the emptiness. Let yourself stand before that door. Listen to the pulse in your chest and realize you are still alive, still able to choose. One day, you may notice that silence no longer feels like an enemy. It becomes the ground on which you rebuild trust in yourself. This video is only a small map, pointing out that the hunger you've carried was never of the body. It has always been an invitation to return, and perhaps behind that half-closed door, there is another passage, leading deeper, where parts of you you've never dared to name are waiting. The only question left is this: will you open that door to see what your soul has been hiding all along?